Welcome to episode 35 of the Aquarius podcast, sponsored by Aquarium Co-op. Before you listen to this episode, I want to say that I thoroughly enjoyed interviewing Mr. Rosario LaCorte. I'm honored that he sacrificed some of his time to sit down and speak with me. However, after listening to this recording, I knew that I had to express my feelings that this one podcast interview alone is not enough to even begin to tell Mr. LaCorte's story or convey how important his contributions to the hobby have been. I had no idea that the opportunity to interview Mr. LaCorte was going to come up at Aquatic Experience 2018. Even if I had, I don't think I could have prepared myself to conduct an interview to better frame just how important of a role he has played in our beloved hobby. So, I would highly recommend that everyone that listens to this episode and holds our hobby dear buy a copy of Mr. LaCorte's autobiography, An Aquarius Journey, so you can read it firsthand who Rosario LaCorte is and what he's done for tropical fish keeping. I read this book nonstop on my 6-hour flight home and have only one final chapter remaining. This book is remarkable and has me searching inward on how I can leave a positive mark on tropical fish keeping and ensure future generations continue to enjoy their own Aquarius journey. Thank you for allowing me to express my thoughts and feelings regarding my personal time with Mr. LaCorte, and I truly hope you enjoy the end result. Now, on to the interview. Today's date is Saturday, October 20th, 2018. This is the Aquarius Podcast, recording at the Aquatic Experience 2018 in Secaucus, New Jersey. And I have the pleasure of being able to interview an absolute legend in the hobby, Mr. Rosario LaCorte. He's here with me right now in my hotel room, and we're going to record an episode for the Aquarius Podcast. I don't have, my usual laundry list of kind of a biography introduction, but if you've been in the hobby and, you know some of the people that have been in it for a while, Mr. LaCorte is an absolute titan in the industry, in the hobby. And it's just an absolute pleasure to be able to interview you, sir. So welcome to the Aquarius Podcast. Thank you very much for being so gracious to take your time and to talk to me.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here.
Excellent. So, just to start with the origin story, how did somebody, that obviously is so accomplished, what was what were your beginnings in the hobby? What were some of the first things, your first experiences?
Well, as the book will tell you, I just finished having the Aquarius Journey. It was just published a few months ago, and I kind of outlined how I got involved in this. I always loved nature as a young boy. I used to collect pollywogs and watch them metamorphose into frogs. I was always interested in insects, any kind of living thing I was interested in. And that's what started me. And there was a medical doctor down the street from me by the name of Dr. Edward Bowler. His family made Bowler's soda in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And he had a tank full of guppies in a window. And before I got involved into tropical fish, I used to go down to the Krill Van Kull, which is only about 5 blocks from where I lived, and collect killies, which were fundulus heteroclitus. And I'd bring them home in milk bottles. Couldn't keep them, didn't know much about them. But I never gave up on it. I was relentless. I kept at it. And eventually I got some guppies from Dr. Bowler, he had a friend that had a fish farm in Florida. And that's where he got his guppies from. And he was kind enough to give me a few, and that's what started me. And when I saw the dazzling colors in the male guppies, I was really hooked on them. And then that graduated when I went to Woolworth's Five and Dime. Every Woolworth's Five and Dime had a little tropical fish section, and you saw black mollies, the common stuff, platies. And in those days, they were only like 20 cents, 29 cents. A lot of money for a kid. It was just during the end of the Depression days in the late 30s. And then when I got a few pennies, I'd buy a few fish and put them under my jacket if it was the wintertime. And they would give you these little cups that were, I guess you'd get Chinese food today, a little container with the little metal handle. And that's what the fish were. So we'd put them underneath our jackets if it was wintertime. And that's what got me started. And I'd always go for a female swordtail or a platy that was pregnant. If she was pregnant, you're going to get some babies from her. So, and then I'd get some young out of it. And that's what started me off. And then it graduated into a little bit more. I got a few tanks. Some of my uncles and aunts, or even my godfather, they'd give you $1, $2, and then you would save a few dollars and you'd buy a fish tank. And it evolved. It kept getting bigger and bigger. And then after World War II was over, We moved to the north end of Elizabeth. My two brothers came back from the service. I was too young for World War II. And I gradually began to build up a small batch of tanks. I think I had maybe 14 or 15 tanks in the house.
What does your family think of all this? Like when you were as a young kid and this interest of yours?
My father was a great gardener. He loved, my father and mother were from Sicily. So every Sicilian had a farm. So that meant they had livestock. They had almost anything you could think of. And my father was no different. He still brought all his old world habits into the United States. And we had ducks in the yard, and we had chickens. And my brother wound up raising some pigeons, and he got involved in canaries. But then he went off to the war. He got wounded twice, Brother Frank. Came back safe and sound. Brother Joe came back safe and sound from the Air Corps. And so I had about 15 tanks. And then when I graduated in 1947, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So one of my friends talked me into joining the Army Air Corps. So we joined the Army Air Corps. And I remember my brother saying to me, "You sure you want to go? That's 3 years is a long time to be away." No, that's what we're going to do. I didn't know what to do with myself. Then the Korean War broke out, and I got stuck for that. Truman said he was going to extend our enlistment, so I got stuck for that. So the tanks that I had before I went to the service, I kept them under the porch in our home. And when I got back, I took them back out. They were under there for 4 years. And I started up again. So my brother Frank, he loved nature too. He was really into it, and he was single yet. And I was the first one of all the boys to get married. There was 5 of us kids, and so Brother Frank said to me, "What would you like for Christmas?" I said, "I think I'll have a fish tank. Maybe you can buy me a fish tank." And that's what started me. And he liked it too. And he would take Jeannie and I, my wife, and take us to the fish stores, and we'd pick up a few fish. And
what were those species that when you got back into it, what were you focusing on?
Well, I saw my first neon tetra right after the war, and this was when I was in junior high school. I wasn't a senior yet. I saw my first neon tetras, and they were like $6. A lot of money. Boy, it was big bucks in those days, because I think my father probably made $15 or $20 a week for a salary.
And that's more than they are now.
Yeah.
And adjusting for inflation, that is, wow, $6 back then.
It was a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
A lot of money. And so it was out of reach. I couldn't buy anything like that. And so I just gradually got bigger and bigger, and I had a little room we lived in the upper part of my parents' home. You'd consider an attic. They weren't really attic rooms. They were just the third floor. And then my family began to grow. I had 2 boys, and we had a small room. That's where I had my fish. I had to move them out, so I decided maybe I'll put a fish house in the garage. I said to my father, "Hey, Pop, how about can I take one of those rooms and make a fish house out of it?" "Go ahead." So I did. But, I outlined the whole thing in the Aquarius Journey. I'm giving the whole story away. I shouldn't do it.
We can jump to it.
Yeah.
We can jump to it.
But you can ask me other questions.
Yeah.
I'd be giving the whole book away.
Yeah, so we'll make sure this an Aquarius Journey. I'll make sure I find out. I'll get some links to this book where people can buy it. I've got a copy. Be jealous because I have a signed copy by you. So that's absolutely fantastic. Let's talk about your breeding of neon tetras. When you eventually did.
Well, yeah, that was a big thing for me, and that was still when I was in the upper part of the house, in what I'd call the attic. And in Elizabeth, we had fantastic water. I mean, you could take water right out of the tap, and I'd let it age for a day, and I'd put the pair of neons, and they would spawn. We had very soft water from the One Anchor Reservoir up in North Jersey. And, of course, I had a lot of great live food in those days, and it was a learning experience. That's one of the first tetras that I actually bred. Actually, they bred because I had good water, and I knew how to handle them. And at first, I was wondering, what am I going to feed them? Everybody talks about infusory. We didn't know that much about it. I didn't know it. I was really a novice yet. I had experience with live bears, but I didn't have much experience with tetras. And so I found out you could use egg yolk. It was all right, but then one day I just accidentally dropped some brine shrimp in there, a newly hatched brine shrimp.
Accidentally?
Accidentally, yeah. I was feeding, and a couple drops went in there. I might have squirted some in there, and I looked at them, Of course, my eyesight was very good in those days. I was still a young guy in my early 20s. I said, wow, look at the pink bellies on those babies. They're that tiny. They can eat that brine shrimp. And I found out, well, you could feed them brine shrimp as soon as they're free swimming. And it worked out pretty good. So I start raising a lot of them. All of a sudden, and then I think about 1953, I joined the New Jersey Aquarium Society. It was a very vibrant society. They started in 1932. And so I joined the club there, and all of a sudden I became the star. Wow, this kid is breeding neon Tetras. Can you believe that? Nobody, I mean, that was a big thing in the early 50s, even the 40s. Hardly anybody did that. It was a big secret. There was no secret. You just had to have good soft water, and you fed them good, and they were conditioned. And it turns out they were not that difficult to spawn. But in those days, there's really not much knowledge about it. And that's what really started my my epic journey, let's put it that way. And it kind of gave me stardom at an early time. And I branched off from that. I met some wonderful people that were in our club, and it just kept getting larger and larger. My fish room got larger and larger. And then in 1960, 61, I increased the size of the garage. I took over the 3-car garage. And I had an invitation to get involved in instant fish, and you could read it in the book. And the people that wanted to get involved in that, they were going to package us in a carton. You can buy a whole toy. And they advanced me some money, and we were able to expand. And it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have had the fish house that I did, because I certainly didn't have the money. I had a growing family. By that time, I had 5 kids, and I was the only breadwinner. I didn't want my wife to work. I wanted the kids to have a mother around. We were family orientated, and so it just got bigger and bigger. And that company really gave me the impetus to really develop the whole place. And the instant fish thing, I knew it wouldn't last, because when you're dealing with livestock and you're dealing with the general public, they just don't have the general knowledge. Some people, it's a flash in the pan thing. Like one of the big things in the early 50s was chinchillas. Boy, you get a chinchilla, they spend $1,200 for one, or maybe a pair. I forget what the price was. And boy, you're going to get big monies for the pelt. Well, it turns out you had to brush those chinchillas, and not every one was, top quality to use for a fur coat. So anyway, that's what happened. My fish house got bigger and bigger, and I had more and more visitors, and then eventually I had visitors from all over the world. As a matter of fact, I think 1963, I had a ledger that I found, a book that I found. It was unused. Somebody threw it away because the date was changed. I know this is a good book. I think I'll use it to record my breedings, and I can keep a record in the fish house. So I did. I kept a record of all the different fish that I spawned, the day they spawned, what was a spawn a success, how many did you get? I didn't count them, but I mean, you can just a general quick look to see and get an idea, an average, what the spawn was like. And then in 1963, I had a visitor from Africa, and I decided to make a guest book out of it. So I have to laugh because I was just thinking about it. About a year and a half ago, I said to my wife, as I was sitting in a book, finishing up on a book, I was adding some things to it and just polishing it up. And I had the guest book in front of me, and I counted the guests that came from all over the world that signed our guest book. I said to my wife, hey, honey, I says, how many people do you think have been to our house to visit us from all over the world? She says, oh, at least 100. I said, no, keep going. 150? No. Keep going. 200. I said, no, I won't play a guessing game anymore. I says, I just finished counting. There's 532 people in our house that you fed. I mean, almost every person that came to our house, they either had lunch or they had coffee and cake. They had a cup of coffee. They had some kind of refreshment that my wife, and she was really the star. If it wasn't for her, I would have never done what I accomplished, because she was very gracious. She never complained, never griped. She was the perfect wife. Really, I owe her a lot.
Oh, that's amazing.
And And after we're married 67 years now, we're going into our 68th next month. As a matter of fact, November 18th will be 67 years.
Congratulations, sir.
So that's a long time, and we're going into our 68th. I hope we make 70.
Oh, excellent!
So,
yeah, it's amazing how this hobby can pull together so many people with this shared interest, such a diverse background that find passion and joy in keeping fish. So that's fantastic that you share that with us.
I wish I had started that guest book in 1954. That's when I really started to gain a little notoriety, and people used to visit. If I had started that book then, I would have had names in that book that it would have been almost 1,000 people.
Wow!
Because I had some very famous people in the hobby that passed away since then, but they weren't around in the late 50s. They died, or in the early 60s. Of course, I started it in '63. But I often think though I would have had close to 1,000 people.
Wow!
But those were the golden years. They were really. It's too bad the hobbyists of today couldn't get a little picture of what life was like being in a hobby then. It was a fantastic hobby. It was wonderful. We had a lot of live food. Clubs were vibrant, a lot of pet shops. It was a very, very vibrant hobby. I think the big shops and the big places kind of killed it. And the biggest thing is the electronics. I think electronics, actually you could see it creeping in when the TVs came out around maybe the early 50s, 53, 54. TVs were around and since may not notice, but the TV was invented, I think, in 1929 was the first time. There was actually a broadcast in TV as an experiment. But you could, after the war, they start building TVs, and people could afford to get them, but they were small, and you needed a big magnifying glass to see the picture that was, you had the image. So in the early 50s, mid-50s, TVs became more prominent, more and more diversified programs. And now you can see in our club, some of the clubs I belong to, I won't be able to make the meeting tonight because I want to see such and such a program, because some of the programs they were entertaining. And you can see how the electronics was starting to erode hobbies, and then it really became prevalent now in the last 15, 20 years. Now you see kids with all these games. They have their own iPads or iPhones, and everybody's forgot about what hobbies are like. And I feel sorry for the kids because when we were kids, every waking hour of our time, we were on a sandlot. We were playing ball. We were running. There's a reason why nature has young kids. You go to a playground and you watch little kids. Did you ever see them walk? They're always running. They're running into nothing. They're going after nothing. They just run.
I can attest to with my son.
They're always running. And you know why that is? Nature, in her wisdom, has programmed kids to run because that's what builds strong bones. And I feel sorry for a lot of kids today. I've been to the restaurants. I see a mother and father and two kids, and every one of them have an iPad in their hand. No conversation. Kids don't speak anymore. There's no conversation, interchange between families. The kids aren't exercising. When we were kids, we were playing. Until the sun went down. We were running, jumping. We were doing something all the time. We never went to the doctor. Now everybody's going to the doctor for something. But even when we had our pets, we had dogs our whole life. We never took them to a veterinarian. They just died of old age. Now they have vets. You get CAT scans, you get X-rays, and they have the special food. So it's even creeped into our pet line.
I really have a hope for, and I agree with what you're saying, but I really have a hope for that the technology, though, that what we can now do with how connected people are, that by sharing our experiences in the hobby, like with through a format like this and some of the guests that I have, I hope that we can continue to share and try to bring new people in and expose people, and hopefully it kind of resets what I think, what you're alluding to, what's happened over the past couple decades, that people get back and they appreciate nature, right? And they try to find more balance in their lives with all of the digital, advertising and media that's out there that's constantly bombarding us, right? That wasn't around hundreds and hundreds of years ago, that we now have today, and that some of the things that kind of happen in our society or even in eternally with us might be caused because we're so addicted to the technology and everything that is. So hopefully maybe there is a silver lining there that we can kind of, start reverting back some of that damage and getting more people engaged with nature and with things like aquariums or reptiles or these natural hobbies, if you will, so that they can appreciate that. What kind of tips would you give for, with your prolific experience in breeding? I myself am a fledgling breeder, right? And so, I hope to be in this for a very, very long time and have wonderful experiences and successes. But what are some kind of key, things that you've learned or things that you would share with somebody like me as they go on their journey of breeding different kinds of fish? And what would be some general tips that you would like to, extend out there?
Well, the most important thing, of course, is cleanliness. Observe your fish. Really, a big thing is you got to give them the right diet. And if you're just going to feed dry food out of a can, you're not going to have very much success. You can culture live foods in your own backyard. There's a lot of books out there that you can learn from. We have the internet today. There's so many things. Of course, there's brine shrimp. You can hatch your own brine shrimp, and you can raise them to adulthood. That's a possibility. You can even culture mosquitoes in your backyard, even though some people might shudder at it, but you can control it if you're careful. You can get live food that way. Just let it fly to you, And of course, if you got a little innovation and you've got some drive, a good time to go is in the wintertime or in early spring. Go to the woodland, look and see any pools and ponds. You might be surprised that there could be Daphnia. It's too early, but if there's no fish there, go back there, learn and find out where they are. Then go back when it starts to get warmer. You may find a Daphnia pond, or if not, if you can maybe get some Daphnia from somewhere and seed it. And I know in Jersey, in northern part of Jersey, there are some places that are still, they still have fairy shrimp. Fairy shrimp is a wonderful food, only it has a very short window. You could culture earthworms. There's a lot of things. I'm not a fan of white worms. A lot of people feed white worms.
How about the red wigglers? Any thoughts on those?
You mean red worms?
Yeah.
Fine. I used to raise them real fine ones and chop them up. It's excellent food. I'm not a fan of white worms because, first of all, there's not much carotenoid in it, so you're not going to get much color. And fish only color from what they eat. They can't manufacture their own. Some of them are born with color in them, but to really excite it, they have to ingest the proper food that's rich in carotenoids that'll really excite the chromatophores where they're going to show their colors. So there's a lot of things you can do. The best thing to do is you read a lot of books. There's a lot of books out there. Internet is a wonderful source. But the technology today, it's really great. I mean, there's some great things for that. You can pick up a lot of stuff. There's interchange between people. That's what's great about the internet. You can make friends all over the world now, exchange ideas. There's so many things that are available to us. So the hobby can be a success, not in the sense that because we had so many live foods, but I still think there's a lot of live foods out there if you really search for it. And I think the little story I told you about going out in the spring when the foliage is down and the woodland is clear of any kind of foliage that obstruct your view, you can find little pools and make your own in your own backyard. So you can culture stuff and help yourself in that way.
Has there ever been a fish that has eluded you in terms of breeding success? Do you have any, or were you pretty successful with most, or almost all of it?
Well, I tell you, I think at the height, I think this might have been in the late 70s when I was starting to make some of the trips to Brazil. I had about 150 different species of fish in my fish room. I bred most of them. There's some that they're tough nuts to crack. I mean, it's just maybe impossible to really breed them in captivity. There's something lacking. But today, with the technology they have, almost any fish they can breed now, but they're using hormones and stuff like that. And to me, that's kind of cheating. But all right, if they can do it, that's fine.
What was one in particular that really gave you a struggle, but maybe you actually ended up being able to breed it? Any particular species that comes to mind?
No, not really. I can't think of anything offhand that really eluded me. I was pretty fortunate. I bred a lot of stuff. I never kept count, but there's an awful lot of fish that were bred in the fish room and in my home where I'm at now. But I don't do too much now because, as you know, I'm almost 90 now. I don't get around like I do. I still have the tendency is I still love the hobby. I'm crazy about it, but physically you just can't do it anymore. You slow down. I have slowed down a lot this year.
So what is in your collection right now then that you've downsized?
Well, I probably have about 30 or 40 tanks left. I'm excited about a couple things I have. I did very well with the red and green laser cats. And last year I had about 28 show up in the several spawns. Total, I gathered about 28 all told of a gold mutation that popped out of it, a gold color. So, and they look pretty nice. And they're really gold when they're young. When you feed them, of course, the brine shrimp does it. You feed them brine shrimp, that really gives them that golden glow, almost to the point of red. So I'm kind of excited about that, and I want to try to fix that strain so I can release it into the hobby and it's there. That will be my parting gift. Because, being up in age now, every day is a gift. I feel like I'm going to live to be honored. I hope I do. I hope I can come back here and when I'm honored and I can give a talk.
Absolutely.
But let's hope so anyway. But I'll still be doing something. I'll keep my fingers wet, and that's my goal.
What's your all-time favorite fish?
I love Carrisons. I really do. And when I was in Brazil, I was fascinated. I mean, I wish everybody could do that. Go to some foreign country, throw your net in the water, and wonder what you're going to come up with. That's that's just, if you love the hobby like I did, that was such a fascinating thing. I was crazy about that. I wish we had digital cameras when I was on these trips. I made 7 trips to Brazil, and I covered a good part of Brazil. I was there for 6 weeks with the Smithsonian, and I was with Stan Weitzman, who is a curator of fishes at the Smithsonian. He got a National Geographic grant, so that included me. And we were there for 6 weeks. We did some research in the south of France for a month, and then we were in the Amazon for a week, and Venezuela for a week. And I wish I had a digital camera because the photographs that I could have had, I was so excited to collect fish. You go to a new place, a new river, a new lake, new pond, new small puddle of water, and you catch a fish. To set up your photography equipment, it's kind of a pain. But with digital photography, man, you could just shoot away and you can see what you got.
Yeah, and some of the...
And it's great, But then, and I still have... There's a picture, and I mentioned it in my book, about a green Krill. No, it wasn't Krill. It was a... Harold Schultz took the picture, a Monkhausia. And there's a picture in Giry's book, Caracoids of the World. When I saw that picture when the book first came out, and I saw that book, by the way, down in Sao Paulo in a museum down there, because Giry sent that book to Dr. Menezes, who's a friend of mine, and we collected together. And he gave him the preliminary book and asked him to review it, to check for mistakes and things like that. And I did see the book before it was published. But I saw the picture that Harold Schultz took, and I collected with Harold Schultz in '58. And he has a picture of a Monkhausia that has the most beautiful green hue to the whole body. It was almost like an emerald green. And I looked at that picture and said, that's impossible. I never saw a fish like that. I wonder if that's a color mistake in the printing or what. But when I was in Brazil, I caught a Krill grutus, which is it's a Carrison, and it was just like that. It was emerald green, the whole body, and I think it's not all that whole species is like that. It's just that particular one stood out, and I think it's in their diet, something they ate that caused that, because you could see how some fish are really glowing with the colors they have. And to give you an example, I was on a banana plantation in the south of Brazil, and I was looking for some Sinolebus, in particular Oriogotatus. And I had been to that banana plantation once before. I met the gentleman who owned it, and he remembered me. And I remember that because I really got sick. I had dysentery. Man, I was a sick puppy. I didn't care if I died. That's how sick I was. Despite my illness and what I was going through, I still had a fish net in my hand. And he destroyed the population of those origatatus because he drained that area and where the bananas were. And he had dug a large ditch. The water was jet black from the bananas, the leaves, because, I don't know if you're aware of it, but bananas only live a year. And it's not really a tree. And the leaves fall down, the whole plant dies, and a new sucker comes out from underneath the roots, and then a new plant grows. So they have they have a harvest once a year. So those leaves keep building up higher and higher, just like peat moss with sphagnum moss. And so I looked in the ditch. The ditch was so black. If you put your hand in the water, it was so peaty looking. If you put your hand in the water and you only buried it, say 2 or 3 inches, you couldn't see your hand. That's how black it was. So I kept probing, and I kept probing, and I said, there's got to be something in here. Finally, I came up with these dazzling tetras. I mean, they were brilliant red. I said, I don't even know what this fish is. And I'm pretty good at knowing what these tetras are. I can recognize most of them. The time I got them back to the museum, the next day, I said, oh, these are Hephaestrobrachon grimi. It looks like grimi is a very close relative to the Von Rio tetra, which is from Rio. And grimi is very similar in appearance, but these were brilliant. I never saw a fish that was so red, and that was from the black water. And I think the reason why they really fish there in black water, I think because it's so dark down there, and in order for fish to see each other, they get that extra glow. And they are really, you can't imagine the color. And I wish I had a digital camera that I could have photographed them in the net, because the next day, by the time I got them back to the museum and I had them in a battery of tanks, the color was gray yet, but they weren't that brilliant. If I had just taken a picture of it, in the same way with that Krill grutus that was so green, if I had a digital camera, the selection of pictures I got lots of pictures of fish, but I would have had an outlandish group of pictures. But today, with the digital cameras, it's great. You can take these pictures on hand. But in those days, it was tough to set up the camera. You had the camera, you got to get the film right, and then you had to get the exposure right. Is this picture going to come out? I'm not too sure. We get the setting right. The sun is out. You don't want to be carrying all that equipment, strobes and all that. So you kind of depending on the natural light. And so it's a completely ball game today. The only bad thing about it is you can't go to Brazil. Brazil is a fascinating country. I love that country, but they shut it down. There's only minimal collecting now. If I was to go down there and collect, they probably would arrest me and throw me in jail. You can't do it. There's only certain people that can do it. They shut a lot of places down. And there's so much diversification in Brazil with different species of fish. You just can't imagine what's there. So many different kinds of fish. It's amazing what's down there.
Do you think that they'll be finding new species for some time to come?
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely. Dr. Myers years ago said that 2/3 of the fish in the Amazon are still undescribed. And I think a few years ago they went down pretty deep. I forget how deep that channel is, but it's pretty deep and it gets pretty murky down there. And they found some new species of I forget what it was. I'm trying to think what it was that was down there, but there's still a lot of undescribed stuff. Yeah. There's probably a lot of big catfish down there because they like the deeper water.
Yeah. What surprised you the most on maybe your first trip to Brazil or maybe a subsequent trip that you weren't expecting?
Well, actually, the first place I was with Axelrod. Herb Axelrod and I were good friends in the mid-'50s. I met him about 1955, and I used to bring fish to his place when he was in Jersey City, when he was just starting out the magazine, and I used to bring fish there once a month, fish that he had never seen before, and he'd photograph them and he'd put them in his book. And we had a good rapport. I liked him, and he was good to me. He was generous. And I told him about Cynolebius. I told him that what an interesting group of fish they were. And I told him about General White, who was chief of the Air Force at that time, Thomas White. And he made several discoveries. It's all outlined in the book. I'm telling you all this stuff again.
Uh-oh.
You got to get the book and read it because it's really laid out pretty strong there. But he did decide to take a trip down there, and he invited him. He paid for it. and we went to Trinidad. That was the first place I actually collected fish, and we discovered a new fish in Trinidad. And it was supposed to be named after me, but somehow it got named after Axelrod, the Hyphestrobrachon axelrodia, but it doesn't matter. It's a very pretty fish. There was about 52 species known on the island at that time. So we discovered a new one. I'm surprised that nobody found it, but there it was in a small pool, isolated pool. It was very dark.
Yeah.
There again, it was black water, and they were solid red.
Yes.
And then in the tank, they sort of paled out, but they were still pretty. You don't see them. I think, how long ago was that? That's in 1958. That was there. That's a long time ago. It's over 50 years ago.
Yeah. So I'll pull us out of the book because I don't want to keep giving spoilers away.
Yeah.
What do you think of those ornamental shrimp? Right. So here at
I think
Aquatic
they're
Experience.
fascinating. Yeah, they're fascinating. I had some ornamental shrimp. The first ones that came out, the first one was that bumblebee shrimp. It was very pretty, fascinating. I got some. That was the first time I ever saw any kind of shrimp. We have grass shrimp along the coast here, and you can collect them and feed them to your fish. If you cook them, they turn bright red. That's the carotenoids in them. It's like a crab. You cook a blue crab, and what happens? He turns red. But anyway, I had the bumblebees, and I didn't know much about them, but I have a sump pump in discharge in my backyard. And I got them in, I think, during the probably spring. And when that sump pump discharge goes into the ditchway in the back, it gets full exposure. I have a deciduous forest in the back of my house. I have about an acre. So there would be filamentous algae growing in that. So I knew shrimp would like the algae. I put that stuff in there. They took off. I mean, you put a handful of algae in there, an hour later it's gone. They have some appetites on them, and they were breeding like crazy. So it was my first experience. I never had any other kind of shrimp. I did get some red shrimp from a friend of mine not too long ago, and I put them in with I have a big batch of Cordo maculatus cats coming in. I had a couple of big spawns. I got about 50 or 60 in about a 50-gallon tank. And I put them in there because there's a lot of algae growing. I said, well, I'll be able to eat the algae. But the catfish got them all. They ate them all up. So that's my recent experience. But I haven't really had much. I haven't had much exposure with them. But I do remember the bumblebee, and I loved them. They were it's a very fascinating group of things. I think that's really one of the big frontiers right now. I mean, it's really popular.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I think that's one of the great ways to introduce new people into the hobby.
It is.
Especially here on the East Coast with, the bedroom footprint, the house footprints being on the smaller side, being able to have a smaller nano tank and have really beautiful ornamental shrimp in it, I think is fantastic. And, they're doing the shrimp competition. They're handing out the awards, and we've got international participation, and it's really fantastic and cool to see.
Right.
From a technology standpoint, aquarium technology, is there anything that you see right now out there that you wish you had when you started out?
I knew about. I was pretty much up on water softeners, and I did fool with sodium exchange resin back in the 50s, and I was pretty successful with it. But I really didn't need it because my water was naturally soft when I was getting Wanakee Reservoir water from North Jersey. And I was very successful. That's what I was breeding neon tetras in. But I did use sodium exchange resin. But we didn't know that much in those days. If you have your water, which is soft, going through the resin, sure, it'll take out the magnesium and calcium salts, but it replaces with sodium. So you're not changing the conductivity. If the conductivity going in, say it's 100 microsiemens, when it goes through your bed of resin, it's going to come out 100 because it's just replacing one ion for another ion. So you're really not gaining anything except if you do have hard water, it's getting rid of the calcium and the magnesium. It will help you. But I wish I had the stuff that they have available now. Now they got ion exchange resins, that's even better. You run a column through that. You have a column and you run water through that. The water comes out like distilled water. And some fish, there's no question about it. If you measure the conductivity in Brazil, in some of those places around the Amazon, that water is really low. It's like maybe 2 microsiemens or 5 microsiemens. That's really soft water. It's almost like rainwater. You can collect rainwater, but then you really should filter it with carbon. It's a little tedious, but I often thought about I did one time, I was thinking about, to give you an example, you could get an umbrella inverted upside down and then punch a hole in it and put it over a barrel, and then you can catch more water. And I said, why isn't there something like that on the market? And I did look on the internet, a number of years ago, and sure enough, there is something on the market that you can collect rainwater and use it. I don't know what it was for. I don't remember now why they did it. People that raise orchids, maybe they did it for that. I don't know. But if you're going to raise orchids, they need soft water is better for them. But people take rainwater off their roof. They can redirect their water off the roof. But I wish I had the deionizers and the exchanges that they had. And what was the other one? The other one they have now available too. But the only thing you have to replace the membrane.
So I think what's so interesting is that and when I asked you that question, I'm in my head I'm thinking the filtration and the lighting and things like that. But you being such an experienced breeder, your response to it is related to water chemistry.
Water chemistry. I'll tell you what else. When I built my fish house, when I went to the garage, the first thing I thought, they got to have natural light. Light is such an effective thing on fish. I put 6 skylights in that roof, and my fish room was wonderful. I mean, the color that I had in my fish was exquisite. Everybody marveled, and that was part of the factor there. It was because of the natural light. The natural light brought out the colors, and of course, I was collecting an inexhaustible amount of Daphnia, and they were good sources of carotenoids, which color the fish up. I'll tell you one thing I did when I used to go out to the Meadows, which is part of Newark Airport now. I went out there, and I always searched. I knew that place upside down.
You're not giving away anything in here.
No, nothing
okay,
there,
good.
because it's. I might have mentioned it in there, but I did come across a brackish water pond that was actually. I don't know why they dug it, but it was dug out by earth movers somehow. I don't know why they used it. Was it for a firewall? I don't know. They eventually filled it in, but I said, oh, look at this big pond. There was a big mound of dirt along the road, and I never saw it. I said, let me look and see what's on the other side of that mound of soil. I looked and I see this beautiful it was an elongated pond. It must have been, a couple 100 yards maybe. I always carried my Daphnia net with me, so I took a couple of scoops, and I said, wow, the whole bottom is covered with, what's this green stuff in here? Well, it was green cyclops. I collected cyclops in the past, but these were really green, and you could see it was like a little bit of algae. There was no fish in the water. I started feeding this cyclops to fish, and at that time I had black phantoms. In fact, I was the one that introduced black phantoms to the hobby. I brought the first ones back from Brazil in '58. I got them from Harold Schultz, and he collected them in the Mato Grosso. And I had my friend Fred Glody, he's in the book. He passed away years ago. He come in he used to visit me every Thursday, and we used to have coffee together. He said, geez, what kind of fish are these up here? I had a whole tank full of red phantoms coming up, and they were red. I says, those are red phantoms. Did you ever see them before? Yeah. He says, what's the color from it? I was feeding this cyclops that were solid green. It was the green algae that they fed on. They were rich in carotenoids. And that's imparted that color. I mean, if you saw the color in those black phantoms to this day, you'll never see anything like that. They were brilliant red. So you collect that live food, and what they feed on, the algae is the secret to everything. You get live food that's fed on algae, then you're going to be a rich source of carotenoids, and that's what colors your fish up. Of course, brine shrimp colors your fish up, too. You feed newly hatched brine shrimp, that has an effect. They all have an effect on what kind of color they're going to get. But today you have myces. You have myces, which come from Canada. That's an interesting shrimp. That was an experiment that they conducted up in Canada. They were going to introduce myces to this big freshwater lake, and they were going to really have trout take off. Well, it turns out that the myces aren't around in the daytime. They stay down when it's light. They stay at the bottom, and they feed at the bottom. The trout are not down there. They're up at the surface. And then he would come up at night and feed. Eventually, the trout died off. They didn't work, but the myces took off. They took over in that lake, and that lake became a source of commercial shrimp collecting, myces.
Wow.
That's where they get it. Actually, that Mysis relicta is the name of it. That's really a remnant of the glacier period. And when we had the glaciers, when the glaciers were here, they moved for that was 10,000 years ago. And then when they receded, they cut swaths of, that's how the Great Lakes were formed. And this lake, Mice's relic is a relic of a saltwater shrimp, and then over eons of time, over thousands of years, they became accustomed to the fresh water. So now they're a freshwater shrimp.
Wow.
But boy, there's a good, excellent source of carotenoids, but not all fish like it. But you can, and they're kind of big. But if you put it in a net and hit it with a hose, with a high power hose like a nozzle, you can break it up into smaller pieces and then put it through a brine shrimp net and feed it to your smaller fishes. As a matter of fact, you can buy frozen, you can get dried krill, you can buy dried mices. And what I did with krill already, I fed krill to young, very small fish, newly hatched tetras. And how you do that? How do you get it? You might say, how do you get krill into a tiny little fish? You bust it up with a high-pressure nozzle, and then you filter through different seines and different kinds of nets. And a brine shrimp net, if you get a brine shrimp net and you let that, what you just put through the net, the dry food, and just go up and down with it, let it go and seep through there, and you can see little fine particles. It almost looks like if you saw it, and they'll feed on that. So that's how you can feed krill to tiny babies that are just newly hatched, that are just swimming around looking for food. And that's one of the things that it's early stages to feed them something that's rich in carotenoids, and it'll give them a good shot, and it'll help color them up at an early stage. So I like to color my fish up. And you can do it naturally. It's a good way. All my fish, and if you look at all the photographs that I have, most of my photographs of fish will have nice colors.
So if somebody was struggling on the brine shrimp or to have consistent supply of brine shrimp, that would be a good way to at least get a natural food into the fish to have them be healthy and colorful then.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. LaCorte, this has been an absolute pleasure. I want to be very respectful of your time. I need to get you back to Aquatic Experience.
Okay.
Because I'm hogging up a lot of the time that other hobbyists want to.
I can talk to you for about 3 or 4 days if you want to. But
that would be wonderful.
That'd be a little tough to do.
Yeah, but Mr. Joe Ferdenzi, a friend of the show, he'd get mad at me if I did.
I have to tell you one thing as we're talking about extended conversations. I don't know if anybody ever did this, but I belong to Metropolitan Area Killifish Association. In fact, I was one of the founders of it. Most of the guys died off. There was like 7 of us guys that put that thing together back in the early 60s. I think it was early 70s or late 60s. When I came back from Brazil, I spoke, I think, 8 months in a row. I gave a presentation because I had so much to say, and I still didn't finish it. So I have so many programs at home that I could do, but it's getting too late now. I mean, as far as, my time is not there anymore. I'm getting older. My memory's still good, but I just don't get around like I used to, I wish I could say I'm going to live another 100 years, or like the Italians, which I am one of, Cendano. It means another 100 years.
If I were to ask you one more question,
sure.
What would you like to say to the hobbyists now? What would you like to see the hobbyists kind of return back to, if anything?
I think in a natural way, I don't know, just be observant. Let me say, let's put it this way. I think I'd give you advice. Be observant, read as much as you can, interchange with other hobbyists. If you learn something, pass your knowledge on. That's what I did. I'd love to share my knowledge with other people. And that's what history is all about. History is passing knowledge on so you don't make a mistake for the future generations. And we keep getting more and more knowledge. So that's my best advice, I guess, to put it mildly.
Yeah. No, and I think, so I've been very much a vocal supporter of people joining their fish clubs. So if anybody that hasn't yet pulled the trigger on joining their local fish club, and I think this is in line with what you're talking about, please do so. Yeah. Join your local fish club, and not just join your local fish club, but be an active participant, engage with other members, have discussions, talk about your failures, talk about your successes. I know that one of the things that I always like to say is that you get amazing deals on fish and plants and selection at the auctions, which are a wonderful thing to do, but I almost want to de-emphasize that and want to build up the camaraderie and the friendship and the knowledge sharing that should be going along with our fish clubs. And it's almost like a Kennedy kind of it's not what ask not what your fish club can do for you, but what you can do for your fish club kind of thing. And so, it's great to go there and hear a great talk and then get some great deals on some fish and shrimp and whatever it is your club is auctioning. But step out of your shell and be an active participant and, meet somebody new, have conversations, and kind of build that family, if you will, right? And maybe that will help us to have strong clubs like we used to have, with your experience, or that was in your experience, rather.
We have some pretty strong clubs yet. As a matter of fact, I'll be speaking again next April? NEC is going to have their convention. Is it next April or is it March?
I think it's usually March or April, right?
March or April, either one. Anyway,
Okay.
they asked me to speak there, and they want me to speak a little bit about the book. And I think there's supposed to be a round table, breeders' sort of camaraderie, a conversation amongst. So I'm involved in that too. So I will be putting on a show, and I'm going to call it a photo journey, and it's just going to be several pictures from all of my different trips that I made and things that happened. Of course, I can't have too many because if I have a lot, I'll be talking forever, and they only give you so much time, and you have to cut it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to have something interesting but there's going to be no charts. While I'm on here, and any of you guys out there that are speakers, try to remember this. This is one thing that it bothers me a little bit. And I know a lot of these guys are my friends, and I don't mean to hurt their feelings, but when you give a program or a presentation, show as many fish pictures as you can. Because some of the guys that put on programs, they have a tendency to have one chart after the other. Oh, well, the rainfall here in Nigeria is so many inches per... Nobody really cares. And then and the water was this, and the temperature was that, and they have all these notes up there, and then they go on to read it. I see what's up there. You don't have to read it, but you're wasting time. I want to see fish pictures, and that's what I always try to do. I always show a lot of fish pictures. I'll show an occasional habitat shot, which is interesting, people shot, which is or the fauna. What about the fauna? Some of the guys have a tendency, especially specialists, they might just speak on a particular fish. They might be interested in a particular fish. When you go collecting, there's other kinds of fish. Anytime I went collecting, I took a survey of the catfish, characins, anything that was in the water that was different, I took an interest in. That's what people want to see. They don't want to see just one type of fish. You have a varied audience out there. Speak in generalities. Show everything. Show that you're interested in everything that's in that stream, not just what you're looking for.
Yeah,
so that's my advice.
That's wonderful. Excellent.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. LaCorte. Well, let's go ahead and get you back to Aquatic Experience. I
Well,
hope
it was
everybody
nice
out.
chatting with
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. This has been such an honor and a privilege that
Thank
you've
you very much for
given me
asking.
your time. So let's get you on back, and everybody, I hope you all enjoyed that. So, An Aquarius Journey by Rosario LaCorte. I will have links to where you can pick this book up. Again, be jealous because he signed my copy, and you're just gonna have to get a copy and just read it and enjoy it.
Come up to NEC in the spring.
There you
I'll be
go.
there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the episode.
Bye-bye, everyone.